Hello and welcome to Brilliant POV. Welcome to our powerful video journey as we uncover the remarkable legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., a true visionary who dedicated his life to the pursuit of equality and justice for all. As a Baptist minister and civil rights activist, Martin Luther King Jr. left an indelible mark on American history by leading the civil rights movement from the mid-1950s until his tragic assassination in 1968. His unwavering belief in nonviolence, rooted in his Christian faith, proved to be a transformative force in the fight against legal segregation of African Americans in the South and beyond. In this video, we will delve deeper into his inspiring philosophy, his courageous leadership during the Montgomery Bus Boycott, the emotional impact of his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, and examine the aftermath of his assassination and its impact on civil rights in America as a whole. This is a story that needs to be heard and remembered. Join us as we pay tribute to a true hero of our times. Number 1. Martin Luther King Jr. was heavily influenced by the philosophy of nonviolence and peaceful resistance espoused by Mahatma Gandhi. King was first introduced to Gandhi's ideas while studying at Morehouse College, where he read Gandhi's autobiography, The Story of My Experiments with Truth. He was deeply moved by Gandhi's use of nonviolent resistance to achieve independence for India from British colonial rule and the way it was used to empower the oppressed and marginalized. King was so inspired by Gandhi's philosophy that he decided to make a pilgrimage to India in 1959 to learn more about his methods. During his trip, he met with many of Gandhi's followers, including his closest disciples, and studied the Indian leaders' writings and speeches. King also walked in Gandhi's footsteps, retracing the Salt March that Gandhi led in 1930 to protest the British salt tax. King's visit to India had a profound impact on him, and upon his return, he began to incorporate many of Gandhi's principles of nonviolence and peaceful resistance into his own activism. He believed that nonviolence was the most powerful weapon for achieving change, and he used it to lead many peaceful protests and boycotts throughout the civil rights movement. King's adherence to nonviolence and peaceful resistance earned him the respect of many people around the world, and helped to make the civil rights movement a powerful force for change in the United States. Number 2. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birth name was Michael King Jr. He was named after his father, Michael King Sr., who was also a Baptist minister. However, in 1934, Michael King Sr. decided to change both of their names to Martin Luther King in honor of the German Protestant leader Martin Luther. This change was made during a trip to Germany, where King Sr. was deeply moved by the Protestant Reformation and the work of Martin Luther. The name change was not only a tribute to Martin Luther, but it also reflected the elder King's growing interest in social activism and his desire to emulate the leadership and activism of Martin Luther. The name change was formalized in 1935 when the family traveled to Europe and King Sr. changed the name on his passport and on the deeds to the family's property. It's worth to mention that although King Jr. is widely known as Martin Luther King Jr., he never legally changed his name. He was often referred to as ML or Mike by close friends and family. But he was most commonly referred to as Martin or Martin Luther in his public life and activism. Number 3. Martin Luther King Jr. was the target of multiple assassination attempts before he was finally killed in 1968. One of the first attempts took place in 1958, when a woman named Izola Curry stabbed him in the chest with a letter opener while he was signing books at a department store in New York City. King was hospitalized for several weeks, but he made a full recovery. Another attempt on King's life took place in 1960, when his house was firebombed while he and his family were sleeping inside. King, his wife, and their children were unharmed, but the house was severely damaged. In 1962, King received a death threat while he was in Albany, Georgia. The city's police chief warned him to leave the city, but King refused to be intimidated and stayed to continue his activism. King was also shot at while he was in Selma, Alabama, in 1965, during the Selma to Montgomery marches. The bullet missed him, but it hit and killed a young boy who was standing nearby. Despite these attempts on his life, King continued to speak out against racial injustice and advocate for civil rights. He believed that he had a moral responsibility to speak out against injustice, and he was determined to continue his work even in the face of danger. King's assassination finally took place on April 4, 1968, when he was shot by James Earl Ray while he was standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. King was rushed to the hospital but died from his wounds. Number 4. Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested 30 times for his civil rights activism during the 1950s and 1960s. He was first arrested in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955 for his role in the Montgomery Bus Boycott. He was arrested again in 1956 for conspiring to organize the boycott, which was considered illegal at the time. King was arrested multiple times while participating in various protests and marches, such as the Birmingham Campaign in 1963, where he was arrested and jailed for his role in the protests. The Birmingham jail was where he wrote his famous Letter from Birmingham Jail, which was a response to the criticism of the civil rights movement by some of the religious leaders. King was also arrested in St. Augustine, Florida in 1964 for trying to integrate a public beach, and in Selma, Alabama in 1965 for participating in a voting rights march. He was also arrested in Chicago in 1966 for leading a protest against housing discrimination. King's arrests were often met with public outrage, and his treatment while in custody was often brutal. He was subjected to physical abuse and solitary confinement, and he was frequently denied the right to contact his family or legal counsel. Despite the arrests and harsh treatment, King never wavered in his commitment to the civil rights movement. He believed that the struggle for civil rights was a moral cause, and he was willing to sacrifice his own freedom to fight for justice. Number 5. Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous "I Have a Dream" speech was not his originally intended speech for the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963. The speech was improvised on the spot, and it was not part of his prepared text. King had prepared a different speech for the march, but when he stepped up to the podium, he felt moved to speak from the heart. He began his speech with his prepared text, but as he spoke, he became increasingly passionate and began to depart from his prepared remarks. As he spoke, King began to draw inspiration from the moment and the crowd, and he started to speak about his dream of a future where all Americans, regardless of race, could live in harmony. He spoke about the need for justice and equality and the importance of freedom and equality for all people. King's "I Have a Dream" speech was widely considered to be one of the most powerful speeches of the civil rights movement and one of the most iconic speeches in American history. It was a powerful call to action, and it helped to galvanize the civil rights movement and move the country towards greater equality and justice for all. The speech is remembered for its powerful imagery and soaring rhetoric, which helped to inspire a generation to work for change. It's considered one of the greatest speeches in American history and is studied in schools and universities around the world. In conclusion, Martin Luther King Jr. was a true beacon of hope and a leader who inspired change in the civil rights movement. His unwavering commitment to nonviolence, his powerful speeches, and his actions have left an indelible mark on history. His leadership during the Montgomery Bus Boycott, his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, and his dedication to the Poor People's Campaign were all a testament to his tireless fight for equality and justice for all. Even though his life was cut short by assassination, his legacy endures and continues to inspire future generations to strive for a more just and equal society. He will always be remembered as a true hero, a civil rights leader and a champion of human rights. We hope this video has not only educated but also touched your heart and soul and has provided a deeper understanding of Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy and the immense impact he had on the civil rights movement. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.